what do we double down on as humans in this age of AI? And to me, it's the human connection and it's community and,
Hmm.
um, human love, like all these things that hopefully no AI can play the same role.
I'm Insoo Hyun, the director of the Center for Life Sciences at the Museum of Science. Today, my guest is Rana el Kaliouby, an entrepreneur and AI specialist. Rana is the co founder of Blue Tulip Ventures, which invests in AI, health, and sustainable living. She's also the host of the Pioneers of AI podcast, which explores the relationship between humanity and artificial intelligence. You are a leader in the AI space, and you've said that your hope is to humanize technology before it dehumanizes us. For our audience members who may not know much about you, where do you sit currently in the AI space, and how do you bring that approach to the work you do?
Yeah, so I got my start as an academic. So I studied computer vision and machine learning, did my PhD at Cambridge University, and came to MIT thinking I would really take an academic kind of career path,
Mhm.
but then had an opportunity to start my company Affectiva out of MIT in 2009. And we pioneered this field of AI called artificial emotional intelligence, really trying to bring social and emotional intelligence to technology and to AI. Sold the company a few years ago, and I now spend most of my time investing in early stage AI startups. And our whole thesis is that AI should be human centric. It should really augment
Mhm.
and amplify human ability, not replace humans. It's not a race between AI and humans. It's really a tool to help unlock human potential. So that's kind of the lens I bring to the AI landscape.
So, how does one humanize AI in that way? Like, how do you actually build that in?
Yeah, a number of ways. Even when you're kind of conversing with a chatbot, say ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini, um, ideally, this technology really understands your emotional states, your intent, what motivates you, your habits, your preferences. Because then that makes it a more effective technology if it really understands where you're coming from, just the way humans are. If you think of the most successful partner or friend or boss, um, that's a person who has emotional intelligence and they can really tap into people's emotional states and use that to personalize an experience or adapt a response. And for the most part, AI doesn't do that. It's completely blind to who we are and how we're feeling.
So why can't AI just like pick up on that? If it's intelligent, if it can learn, why can't it learn to be emotionally intelligent?
Yeah, I think we're on the path. We're getting there, or we're starting to get there, I guess. It all depends on the input to the AI, and a lot of AI today is very focused on text or the actual words, right?
Hmm.
Um, and if you think about how humans communicate, over 90% of how we communicate is nonverbal, and it's kind of split equally between your facial expressions, your hand gestures, your body posture, your vocal intonations. And think about it, when you're chatting with ChatGPT, it's completely oblivious to all of these nonverbal cues. So I've literally spent over 20 years of my life kind of trying to build a technology that can read your facial expressions of emotions, that can kind of assess the tone of voice. Are you speaking fast? Are you nervous? Are you excited? Um, and that's still devoid of most of the technologies we use today.
Yeah. So let me back it up just a little bit then. How do you define emotional intelligence? Like, what's that concept in your mind that you're trying to bring to this program?
It is the ability to understand a person's expressions of emotions and their mental state. So it's not just an emotional state, but it's also your cognitive state.
Like being able to like read the room, kind of, but
E-
but the person in front of you.
Exactly.
Okay.
Or in some instances, persons in front of you. It's a
Uh-huh.
great point. Like when you're on stage presenting or giving a keynote, often we're doing that in real time. We're assessing, is the audience engaged? If they're not, then you kind of switch it up a little bit.
Hmm.
Educators do that all the time, right? Um, so most humans are pretty good at doing that, and we do it subconsciously.
Hmm.
But it's missing from technology. And then you use this information, if you have emotional intelligence, to adapt your response, right? If you see that a person is stressed or upset, then you may show empathy, and And again, it's actually important in every aspect of our lives. Um, and that's kind of the emotional intelligence that's missing from technology today.
So how close is AI getting right now to that?
I think the fascinating thing is we've got all the pieces. Like we've actually got the algorithms that allow us to read these expressions pretty accurately. My company, Affectiva, which we then sold to a Swedish publicly traded company, one of the applications was using this in a car to detect if a driver is paying attention, if they're texting while driving, if they're falling asleep at the wheel. These are all expressions that we humans are pretty good at detecting. And we were able to get the algorithm to do the same in a very accurate way. So all the pieces are there. It's just not integrated at scale, and it hasn't become mainstream yet. Yeah.
What's the most difficult part then of getting it to that point?
I think there's definitely a privacy consideration, right? Because to be able to read these cues, you need a camera on most of the time. So we think a lot about privacy considerations and not storing the video data and whatnot. So I think that's one. Um, yeah, I think that's it's also complex. Humans are complex, right? In the early days of this field, a lot of researchers took a very simplistic approach. So if you see a smile, you assume a person is happy, and if you do that, then they're, angry or sad. And humans are more complex than that. There's actually like at least 100 meanings of your smile. You could smile to express joy or politeness or flirting. Like there's just so many renditions of embarrassment. And we haven't yet figured out what the signature is for all these different nuanced expressions. So I think that's another reason why it hasn't become mainstream. It's actually a pretty complex problem to solve.
So what are the applications of having AI be more emotionally intelligent?
Intelligent.
Why would you want that?
Yeah. I mean, I'll name some applications that we've explored as a company and as a field. One is in the automotive field, right? So if you're able to understand a driver's emotional state, again, whether they're paying attention, if they're falling asleep, if they're angry, road rage, right? If they're distraught and upset, then maybe they're not focused on the driving task. These are all opportunities for the car to intervene and perhaps even take control. In the world of semi-autonomous or fully autonomous vehicles, the car can say, you know what? And so you look really tired right now. I'm going to take over while you take a power nap, right? So that's one area. Another area that I'm very passionate about is applying this to mental health. So if you have, today, the gold standard for understanding if a person is stressed or depressed or suicidal even is asking them on a scale from 1 to 10 to self kind of, what's the word?
Like self-report.
Self-report, thank you. Self-report their state, and it's often very inaccurate. But there are telltale signs in a person's facial expressions and also tone of voice that could provide objective longitudinal data about a person's mental health. So, and potentially flag that early on to get the person some help. So that's an area that I'm very excited about. Education is another one. I mean, we're having this conversation at the Museum of Science, and the best educators can really tap into the emotional experience of a learner. And so imagine an AI tutor that could do that and can really personalize the learning experience. So yeah, lots of applications. I mean, honestly, I feel that one day we will look back and say, wow, like how did we live with technology that wasn't emotionally and socially intelligent? I mean, robotics is another area, right? As we're going to see more and more robots installed in our everyday lives and cobots, like collaborating with humans. How are these entities going to collaborate with us if they don't understand how to deal with humans and how to engage humans? So I really see it as a critical piece of any successful technology.
So what you're describing is a interpersonal skill that people have to have relationships with other people.
Totally.
So then it seems like we're on the path then for the possibility of humans having some kind of social relationship or friendship, or you mentioned counseling with AI. Is that where you would like to see it head?
I think it's a slippery slope.
Uh-huh.
I think it's important that as technology becomes more and more mainstream, that it understand and we're, we did a study at some point, and people check their phones at least 10 times an hour,
Wow.
right?
Mhm.
So every time you check in with a device, that's like you're engaging with the device, right? So I feel like we're already on a path where we need to have this productive kind of trust-based, empathy-based relationship with technology. But I think it can very quickly turn into a slippery slope. And um, I do worry about young people spending so much time with AI friends. I worry about the concept of an AI therapist is a really powerful one, but if we're not careful and we don't build guardrails into these AI platforms, it can. I mean, we've already unfortunately seen examples where it can go really um, wrong. Um, so I think if we're going to do that, we have to be very intentional about how we're building these AI systems and really prioritizing safety and the security and privacy of these platforms.
What is it about your background that got you interested in this direction? I mean, it's such a cool new area of AI.
Um, so I'm originally from Egypt. I grew up around the Middle East, and I've always been fascinated by how this idea that there's this silent language with which we communicate that's not the words we're using, right? I've always been fascinated with that. And so when I started my PhD, it was also my first experience living away from home. I moved from Egypt to the UK, and all
Mhm.
my family were still in the UK. And I just remember it was back in the day where I used this chatting messaging platform called ICQ. I don't know if you've ever used that. Yeah. Um, and I just remember feeling, wow, like all of the richness of our emotional experiences were kind of disappeared in cyberspace
Mhm.
when I was interacting with my family online, and reduced to like sending little stupid emojis, right? And I just started asking the question, what if technology could capture the richness of our emotional experiences? What would that look like?
That brings up for me a really fascinating point about how sometimes culturally there are differences in
Hmm.
how people express happiness or just like how open they are about their own emotions. So, does that get factored in?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We ran into that very early on in our research. There are definitely cross-cultural. A lot of facial expressions are by and large universal, like a smile is a smile everywhere. However, there are these nuanced cross-cultural differences. For example, a nod in most Western cultures, this is a head nod, which implies yes, and this is a head shake, which implies no. But in India, it's more like that, right? And it confuses our algorithm unless we train specifically for it.
Mhm.
We also found that some cultures tend to dampen or even mask their facial expressions,
Mhm.
like out of politeness. So we had to kind of factor that into consideration. Some cultures are just more expressive, like Latin Americans and
Mhm.
probably Egyptians are very expressive
Mhm.
compared to some Scandinavian
Mhm.
cultures that are more muted. Um, so we had to build that into into both our training data, but also into how the algorithm
Mhm.
benchmarks a person's expressions as well.
Some critics might say, well, when I think about emotional intelligence, one of the positives about it, of developing that, having that, is that it's good for the person who has the emotional intelligence to use it to like self-regulate
Hmm.
or to kind of
Totally.
it's helpful for the person who expresses that. But in your case, it may not matter so much whether AI could ever kind of have that internal feeling or benefit of that kind of regulation, and it's more what's important is how the other person, how the human perceives like that there seems to be something like empathy going on or understanding in that emotional level. Is that a little bit deceptive? I mean, so I can imagine some critics say it's not genuine, it's not authentic, what we would call like human empathy or emotional awareness. but it's making the other person feel as if that's present, and that could be bad. What do you think about the kind of authenticity concern?
I think what is fascinating is that humans actually already anthropomorphize technology and chatbots and robots and whatnot. Um, so I think we already aren't too concerned about the fact that I mean, for the most part, people realize that these are technologies that are not feeling emotions, but still they do feel the empathetic reactions. There is a whole body of research that is trying to implement emotional systems within kind of, especially in robotics, humanoid robots. So a lot of these humanoid robots have their own internal emotional systems that help regulate what the robot does.
Mm.
So that's fascinating too. But I think that's a little different than just being able to tap into a person's emotional experience and respond to it intelligently.
I'm sure you've heard of people who claim that they're like in a they're in a romantic relationship with AI.
Yep.
Or what do you think about that?
I I worry about that, to be honest. There is a really fascinating, actually, podcast series called Bot Love, where they've featured people who do have a romantic relationship um, with AI friends and AI characters and
Mhm.
bots. Um, I mean, the sad thing is that a lot of people feel very lonely, and these friends or companions can be there for you 24/7. A lot of the times, they're yes friends, right? They basically are always affirming and validating a person, so it feels good. It
Mhm.
feels good. But I do worry that that takes away from human to human relationships, which and I personally believe there's no substitute for that. And in fact, um, I always think about like what do we double down on as humans in this age of AI? And to me, it's the human connection and it's community and
Mhm.
um, human love, like all these things that hopefully no AI can play the same role. Yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine different schools of thought on this issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because in philosophy, there are different schools of thought about what it means for someone to have a good life. So
Mm-hmm.
one school of thought is as long as a person has very pleasurable mental states and is happy, as long as they're experiencing that, whether it's interacting with an AI chatbot or in a real, quote unquote, real human relationship, what matters most is kind of how they're experiencing the relationship. And so that would seem then to say that it's okay. It's okay, for people to have a romantic relationship with AI chatbot. But there's another school of thought that says it's not just that the mental experience is a happy one, but it's caused in the right way.
Mm-hmm.
It's caused by a real relationship, not something that like, you can imagine being plugged into an experience machine and you think it's feeding you all these experiences like I'm so popular and everybody respects me and it's all just sensations being fed into your brain. It's not there's not a real connection to the world. And counter to that, which is the first view I
Mm-hmm.
presented, it should be really important that it's actually because you are admired by other people. It's actually because there is somebody who loves you. It's not that you're just made to believe that. So on that second school of thought, I think that's where the pushback could come. Sort of like that's
Right.
not an objectively good life. It's you think you're leading a good life, but if given the two options, I would much rather be in this
Yeah.
second option.
Yeah, I struggle with that a little bit because I kind of feel like what is truly magical about what makes us human is this human connection,
Mhm.
and being able to share love and feel love and be part of a community of people who you know sh- share this special connection. On the However, I do think it will become normalized that people be in relationships
Mhm.
with AI entities, whether they're embodied or not, right? They could be chatbots on a 2D screen, but eventually they'll be humanoid robots, right? Um, and and yeah, it might just become culturally acceptable. And if it makes the person happy, who are we to judge, right?
But it's a wild scenario because you can imagine if we were in a world where you can have these sorts of AI friends that are, whether they're embodied in robots or not, I mean, I would think that these would be, in principle, immortal friends. Like you wouldn't like grow old together. I mean, maybe you could set it up in a way that like you're experiencing aging together somehow, or kind of going through life stages
Never
together.
thought of that. Hmm.
But can also be that it's well, it's like an immortal being, immortal friend, and I think that's unusual because we don't have those in
Yeah,
real life.
that's so true.
And if we actually build it in a way that the AI is also experiencing emotions, what would it be like for the AI being to kind of be this?
Yeah, the AI could
On the
wake up
one hand,
one
super
day.
fragile, and on the other hand, super robust. Like you just transfer it into other physical forms, and it would keep going.
What is kind of really intriguing about all of this is people get emotionally attached
Right.
to there's a lot of like if you listen to some of these stories on this podcast Bot Love, at some point one of the companies building these AI characters updated the AI, like they updated the algorithm. They probably integrated one of the newer versions
Mhm.
of some of these models, right? And it changed the character, it changed the personality of these AI friends and companions. And a lot of the users complained. They hated it because in a way, it's like you wake up tomorrow and you're a completely different
Right.
Insoo. And we're not used to that as humans. We get attached to a personality, even if the next version of the personality is better, we're still attached to a particular rendition of a person.
That's so fascinating because that's absolutely true that when you think about your close relationships, they all have a history. There's a history to them. Like
Yep.
there's time. There's a lot of it's over
Shared. Yeah.
share time, right?
Right.
So yeah, if you get a quick upgrade, you might have these like jarring severances of these what were thought to be kind of long, continuous developing relations.
I want to build on that because one of the things I've been really thinking about in AI is this idea of memory.
Hmm.
And in fact, with my investor hat on, I really think of memory as a moat, as a competitive advantage, and that makes you defensible and sticky as a technology. But the way we're implementing memory in AI today, it's just basically a dump of every single interaction you've had with this technology. Whereas if you think of human
Right.
memory,
It's selective.
it's
Yeah.
selective. We kind of pick and choose which memories we store and keep. We also
Wow,
use
you
a
want
lot
a
of
friend that remembers every conversation you had, and we'll bring it up.
right. But it's useful to kind of be able to put more weight on some more emotional
Right.
experiences and forget that something happened.
That's
There's
interesting.
recency biases,
Yeah.
there's transience, and we don't have those currently implemented in AI at all. There are some companies working on that, but I find it really, I wonder like what that would look like when we actually implement these more sophisticated models of memory inspired by human memory.
If you're building these kind of more socially capable AI systems, is there a model of kind of like what a healthy AI kind of like psychological system would be, or is it just like you'll find out like what it develops into? Are you trying to like get it to some kind of like ideal?
I think there's a lot of so empathy is a key part. There's been a lot of, again, just given everything that's happening with the AI therapy space and people using AI for mental health support.
Mhm.
Um, there's now like OpenAI has a new advisory board, for example, that's just focused on the use of AI for mental health applications. Um, I think what is missing today is a real serious look at the guardrails that are implemented in these AI systems. Because you could very quickly manipulate the AI.
Mhm.
For example, if you had suicidal intent, you could ask the AI for recommendations
Mhm.
on how to end your life, right? And if you ask it directly, it will probably decline to answer, but you can so easily change the prompt and have it
Mhm.
kind of, be a conduit.
Mhm.
So so I think we need to build more sophisticated safeguard rails, guardrails, to ensure safety
So
in these
kind
models.
of like a basic minimum of like being a decent friend, or you have like an idea of like, okay, like a good friend would always kind of have my best interests at heart. Sometimes we'll have to kind of tell me things I don't want to hear.
Right. Right.
So it's like, yeah, so kind of like
Exactly.
some parameters.
And at some point, your friend may need to escalate this, right?
Mhm.
To get you help, right? And again, like there's a lot of considerations on when it's okay for an AI to escalate this to a parent, right? Because a lot of young people are struggling with this. So when is it right for the AI to then bring in somebody else into the conversation, right?
Mhm.
Because if it does that all the time, then it's not at all a private conversation, and we don't want that.
Mhm.
But if it can't do that at all, um, I think it becomes quite dangerous too. So finding that balance is that balance of trust, but also like um, yeah, ensuring your safety
Mhm.
is really is hard. I don't think we've figured that out. Also, as AI becomes more and more agentic, when it's able to act on your behalf and do things on your behalf, that's a whole other consideration. Like, how much autonomy do you want your AI agent to have?
Mhm.
And on the one hand, you want it to be quite autonomous so you can delegate tasks to it, but you can quickly lose control of what this AI is doing.
I'm just trying to imagine if I had an AI friend that didn't sleep, was always available. I don't I and could answer so many questions I have, maybe has like a level of wisdom
Hmm.
that I crave. It would be it would be hard not to rely too much on that friend. Right?
Yeah, I mean, I use ChatGPT for all sorts of advice, honestly. Like, I
Like,
go to it for a lot of professional, obviously, tasks,
uh-huh.
but also just a lot of personal questions. Like, it's
Really?
it's my first. I turn to it first before I go to an actual human to get advice on things,
Uh-huh.
parenting advice, relationship advice.
Uh-huh.
Um, so it's really, and if you do that at scale, if we all do that at scale, and instead of calling your best friend
Yeah.
to kind of talk about a recent challenge at work or in your relationship or whatever, you're now talking to AI. If we do that at scale, it really changes the moral fabric of our society,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I think there are a lot of big implications
Really,
on this.
so I'm just thinking this through even more. Okay, so you're a parent, I'm a parent.
Mhm.
We know that our kids, their friends are so important and they're so influential in shaping them. How how young should people be to start would you let kids interact with the kind of things you're developing, or would you wait? What would be the right age?
I think we really need to be careful about having young people um, embrace these technologies as AI friends, as AI companions, right?
Mhm.
Um, because they're still kind of it's formative years. We don't know the long-term implications of these relationships, right?
Mhm.
Until we have a better picture of what this may look like, I'm not comfortable. My son is 16,
Uh-huh.
and he's very, very AI forward. He's always trying the latest new AI tools out there. And he's pretty AI fluent, I would say. But thank goodness he has not yet embraced having an AI friend. And I'm like,
Well, that's really interesting because people will say, well, but that's what your work is kind of heading us in that direction.
well, again,
So are you kind of like, people say, oh, there are some people in Silicon Valley who say, well, we don't let our kids use the social media platforms that we're like developing. It's a kind of
no, I think,
little bit of attention.
well, no, I actually love that he's embracing all these AI tools. I just don't think the right use case is a companion that you can. You know what? I actually think having AI companions and AI co-pilots is great. It's just that if you take it too far,
Mhm.
and it starts hurting our human relationships, that's when I think it may become unhealthy, and I worry about that. So my answer, I guess, is it depends, right? It depends on what the use case is, what's the context. I think young people should not be allowed to spend. I think the average for young people who have AI friends, the average number of hours they spend each day with their AI friend is about 6 hours a day. And I think these companies building these companions should really put some guardrails on there. And if you're a 16-year-old young man and you've been talking to this thing for 4 hours, I really think it should say, you know what? done
I'm
for
tired.
today. I'm tired. Like, go talk to
Right,
somebody.
right. Well, that's what I was saying. It,
Yeah.
it will never get tired, and it's never going to say, I need to eat now, or just, you're talking my ear off. So yeah, so there needs to be some limitation. Otherwise, you can imagine people just
Correct.
spending so much time.
But that's where the incentives of the companies building these technologies
Right.
become so important, because if you're trying to just maximize
Mhm.
engagement,
Yeah,
then you will never build any of these knobs in, right? You want the person to
absolutely.
spend as many hours as possible because that's how you monetize, etc.
Right, right.
But if you're doing it responsibly, then you start putting these guardrails to limit usage, because I think that's the healthier way to do it.
Because these are for-profit companies,
Yeah.
right? So
Oh, yeah.
yeah, that they might not always have the well-being, maximal well-being of the
Yeah.
of the client in mind. So on your podcast, Pioneers of AI, you've talked to so many thought leaders in the space of AI in this field. And was there a moment or were there insights that you had during these many conversations that really stuck with you, that like surprised you?
Um, I always end every conversation with the same question, which is, I ask our guests, what do they think it means to be human in the age of AI?
Mm.
And I have loved the answers. Actually, to celebrate our 1 year anniversary, we compiled a collage of our guests' answers, and it's everything that ranges from human connection to human agency, human curiosity, creativity, of course, comes up, love, right? So I've really kind of enjoyed. It's kind of really cool to see how people answer this question. I've loved. We had Ariana Huffington on the show, and she takes a very kind of spiritual approach to AI. Actually,
Mhm.
very philosophical, very spiritual, and I feel it's almost like an oxymoron to think of AI as a way. Um, she calls it like the GPS of our soul. And I thought that was really fascinating to think of AI that way. We often think about AI as a tool for productivity and efficiency,
Mhm.
but the way she thinks about it is a tool that helps us actually be the better versions of ourselves, in a kind of very mindful and intentional way. I thought that was really cool.
So what are your hopes for the future? I mean, where do you see this going? What do you hope this technology can do for us?
I'm excited about the applications of AI, in the health and wellness space. Everything from, AI powered wearables that can really help you understand your health, own it, personalize it. I think that's really exciting. And I know you spend a lot of time in that space as well, but so much potential for AI, just helping with preventative medicine, precision medicine. So that's an area where I spend a lot of my time. I'm excited about how AI can help us rethink our food systems and food innovation, and um, make food more accessible and healthier, and
Mhm.
etc. I love the space of robotics and AI, and I think that's a very exciting space as well. So I'm excited for the future. I just think we need to be very intentional about how we build these technologies, because it could go really wrong really fast if we're not thoughtful and building it in a responsible way.
There's so much hype around this area. Can you give us a little bit of a reality check? I mean, what do you think about the hype?
I mean, I still think we're in the early days of all of this, so it's exciting. So much innovation is happening, and we need the innovation across the board. Um, but I'm also a pragmatist, having spent many years building this technology myself, and also studying kind of what makes humans special. I think we have a long ways to go before we get to this idea of an artificial general intelligence, or AGI. But having said all of that, there are very exciting short term and medium term possibilities that AI unlocks, especially what we call vertical AI applications. So, how can AI come into a very specific industry, or to solve a very specific pain point? And I think this is real. It's very disruptive. I really do think organizations, big and small, should be embracing AI in everything, yeah, across all their functions. So I do think it's an important technology. It's a transformative technology, but is it going to take over humanity? I'm not seeing that.
I hope you're right.
I hope so too.
Well, thank you so much for helping us think about ways to humanize technology. Really enjoyed talking with you. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.